It's not weird if you leave the sauna wearing the same thing that you wore into it.
What's up, YouTube? You know the drill. The Fat Guy and I talk about the Dolphins, their coaching staff, who they've added, who they've lost. Then we go over the roster. Then we give you their team grade going into 2018 and let you know if you should bet the over or the under on the Dolphins' 5.5 wins. Fat Guy, last year the Dolphins won 6 games. What did you think of Jay Cutler and their season? Fat Guy, the Dolphins won 6 games last year. What did you think of their season?
Like my safe word, boring. Yeah, the Dolphins won 6 games. They had a lot of uninspiring performances. I actually thought they were the worst team in the league when they had to beat Cleveland in overtime. Beating the Cleveland Browns of last year shouldn't be that difficult. However, they did cap it off impressively by beating the New England Patriots in exciting fashion. It was almost a dominant performance, which is really weird to think. I don't know why New England has a trouble with Miami, but they did last year and they might this year. Well, probably not.
At head coach, they have Adam Gase, who's gone 16-16 for his career for an even 50% winning percentage. What do you think of Adam Gase as a head coach?
Well, kudos to Adam Gase for making the playoffs in his first year, because that Dolphins team sucked too. So that was really impressive. I always liked him. He was a coordinator for Peyton Manning and that fearsome offense and then terrible offense, Denver Broncos. Then he managed to glean a little bit of effort out of Jay Cutler and had a reasonable year as a coordinator of the Bears. Then he took on the tall task of coaching these deranged Miami Dolphins. And yeah, 10-6 first year, 6-10 the next. 6-10 is probably what they should have went both years, considering the lack of talent on these rosters. And he's also kind of tired of the attitudes, let's say, of some of the players, which we'll go over shortly.
And at offensive coordinator, they have ya boy, Dowell Logains.
Dowell Logains. That sounds like a really bad drug dealer's name.
I'm sorry, it's a white guy. It's Dowell Logans.
Well, you just assume that because he's a white guy, he wasn't a drug dealer? Shame on you. But yeah, Dowell Loggins, he's been in and around the league for quite some time. Well, not that time. He's still a young one. He was with Adam Gase in Chicago, I believe. He was a quality control coach and then offensive coordinator. And he got fired along with John Fox. And he also got relieved of duties in Tennessee. But now he's back with Adam Gase in Miami. Not really sure how I feel about it. I still think Adam Gase is probably going to rule the roost when it comes to the offense.
And at defensive coordinator, Matt Burke.
Matt Burke, a reasonably, a decade-long linebackers coach, recently promoted. Not much is known about Matt Burke, I would say. But he is a young guy, and this is a young staff. So hopefully this young approach to football works out for the Dolphins. It certainly did for the Rams.
And for notable additions, they've added quarterback Brock Osweiler.
Yeah, but Brock Osweiler, I think everybody knows Brock Osweiler for the wrong reasons. He's not exactly a strong player. I'd be surprised if you couldn't just find a UDFA that does better than him. You know what it is? It's because he's been paid lots of money at multiple junctures, and he's a big guy, and I don't think he's an asshole. Assholes don't get this many chances unless you're really talented, and he isn't.
And at running back, Frank Gore.
Frank Gore came from the U, circling right back. Storied career, Frank Gore. Definitely a Hall of Famer. Excellent player for the 49ers. Played a few meaningful seasons with the Colts. I'm sure he's encroaching on a lot of records in the NFL. Frank Gore is a timeless wonder. I think he's a great running back. I'm not sure we're going to see the Frank Gore of old, and I don't expect it. But he should be a contributor. He really should kind of start, actually, for these Miami Dolphins. But if he gets usurped by Kenyon Drake, who looked really good last year, or perhaps the young Kalen Ballage, that'd be a nice storyline for Miami.
And at wide receiver, they add Danny Amendola as well as Albert Wilson.
Danny Amendola of the fabled New England Patriots, quite the playoff contributor. Now, he came from the Rams, and when the New England signed him, I thought every year this will be the year that he gets cut. It didn't really happen. He kind of stepped out when he needed to. It did help, though, that a lot of the times he was thrust into action by injury rather than merit. A lot with Julian Edelman going down last year and Wes Welker going down for one of the years in his career. So Danny Amendola has kind of been a piece that's been serviceable when necessary. I don't know what Miami expects from Danny Amendola, but he will be serviceable when necessary.
And Albert Wilson, he might even get cut. He's played for the Chiefs for a few years. nothing too notable, just kind of a guy out there.
An underwhelming receiving core in Kansas City. It's been that way for quite some time. I can't remember the last. Yeah, I guess Dwayne Bowe. Can you guys think about this? Dwayne Bowe of Cleveland effortless notoriety. He was the last big wide receiver in Kansas City, really. And yeah, he had 2 good years, and they weren't crazy. I think one might be 1,000-yard year. I'm not really sure. But Dwayne Bowe was the last one, and Albert Wilson, he couldn't really cut it with that Kansas City Chiefs core. Can he really bring that much talent to this Miami receiving group? I'm not really sure.
That's disrespectful for Tyreek Hill.
Yes, Tyreek Hill is a fantastic talent, but I'm thinking big picture, and Tyreek Hill just didn't come to mind at that juncture, especially at being a hard 5'8".
And at guard, they add Josh Sitton as well as center Daniel Kilgore.
Josh Sitton, he's been a longtime veteran in this league. Fantastic player at one point in his career. Is he a little bit long in the tooth? Yes. Can they maybe squeeze something out of him? Perhaps. Daniel Kilgore has also been a long time in the league. I believe he blocked for Frank Gore in San Francisco, although I'm not really sure if he started necessarily. But those are two veterans that at a minimum are going to push some of the young talent in this offensive line, or they can fill in when needed.
And then a couple of rookies as well at tight end, Mike Gesicki, and running back, as you mentioned earlier, Kalen Ballage.
Mike Gesicki, we just watched a highlight reel where it was named Slippery, and the only thing that was slippery in that highlight reel was A, my pants, and B, the grass. It just was really underwhelming. And of course, it's just a highlight reel that we watched, but Mike Gesicki he looked underwhelming. So I'm not really sure what to bring. Tight ends take a long time to develop, and from what I can see from other videos, it doesn't seem like he's an excellent pass blocker, run blocker, so it's going to be hard to get on the field, I would imagine, especially if you're not that good after the catch. Yeah, it looked like he made some spectacular catches, but when every catch is contested, your catch rate goes down, and that's for sure. Think of guys like Dez Bryant, who never really get separation. They always just end up catching jump balls.
And talk about Kalen Ballage.
Now, I really like Kalen Ballage. The one thing we notice when watching his snaps is he carries the ball just in his right hand, and he doesn't use a stiff arm, but he makes excellent reads. He can see where the play is going to develop. He has patience, too, and he does the old Jim Brown thing, where instead of going out of bounds, he'll just smash into a guy. I always like that, because why not? Might as well be the aggressor. You're playing an alpha males game. Dial it in, smash into a guy, leave some hurt on the field before you go out of bounds. So I really like Kalen Ballage in that sense. He doesn't look like he's got much speed to him. It could surprise me, but he didn't seem NFL fast, let's say. I'm sure in regular life he can beat anybody in a race who's going to be listening to this little YouTube video we got going on here. But aside from that, I don't think he's NFL fast. But you don't really need to be. Le'Veon Bell isn't really that fast, and Le'Veon Bell's the best in the game.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where they've added defensive end, the doctor, I believe, Mrs. Quinn, Robert Quinn.
Robert Quinn, Medicine Woman, my fantasy football team name just a few years ago. Robert Quinn, he terrorized defenses for quite some time, and he I guess he's aged a little bit because he doesn't quite have the same production he used to. What do you mean doesn't quite? Of course he doesn't. He put 20 sacks up not that long ago. Robert Quinn's a good player. I don't know if he's going to be as disruptive as Ndamukong Suh can be, but might not have to. Ndamukong Suh, losing him, which I'm sure we'll bring up in just a moment, that will definitely leave a gap in the defense, but if you didn't want to be there, it's not as big a deal as you would think. And maybe if they get production off the end with Robert Quinn and Cameron Wake, you could see maybe an uptick in sack production in Miami this year.
They also added defensive tackle Akeem Spence.
Akeem Spence, another veteran, nice to rotate. I love rotating on the defense. If you can rotate a veteran who can be productive for a few snaps a game, it's definitely beneficial.
The other additions they made were rookies, and that's at nickel cornerback Minkah Fitzpatrick, as well as possible linebacker and third-round pick Jerome Baker.
I'm not going to put Minkah Fitzpatrick into a box because I think he could play anywhere, not necessarily nickel corner. Like, could he not play safety?
Possibly.
It is possible, right? And what if they play three safeties in a couple sets, different packages? I feel like he's going to move around the secondary all over the place. Yeah, I'm probably not outside corner, but Minkah Fitzpatrick definitely is going to get the snaps and show that he is a worthy first-round pick, hopefully. I mean, if you play on Alabama defense, chances are good.
Now, for players they've lost, let's start at quarterback, where they lost Jay Cutler.
Whatever, I'm sure he's smoking somewhere.
And at wide receiver, Jarvis Landry.
Oh, I got to circle back to Jay Cutler. On the 1-0 scale, his wife is definitely a 1. Now, Jarvis Landry, He's getting paid a ton of money to be a slot receiver, essentially, for Cleveland. So I'd say good riddance in Miami. A little bit of a bad attitude, it feels like. Left a lot to be desired last year in yards after the catch. I don't think he really fits with what Adam Gase wants to do. So what is Miami's loss is going to be Cleveland's problem.
And at tight end, they lost Julius Thomas, who's another addition by subtraction.
We actually made a video on this and thought he would do well last year. And I don't think we were wrong in our assessment. It's just the effort level was absolutely abhorrent. If anybody watched them play the Saints last year, we also bet on Miami against the Saints last year. Who would do that in London? But yeah, we bet on them, and Julius Thomas could have changed the tides of that game. Rather than scoring a touchdown, he gave up an interception in the end zone, I believe near the end of half. It was just like brutal effort. He had brutal effort, so they're just replacing him with a rookie essentially, and maybe someone else will sign off the street. But losing Julius Thomas is definitely a benefit for Miami this year.
They lost a bad boy at center in Mike Pouncey.
Yeah, Mike Pouncey, that's a tough one to lose. And definitely a bad boy on the field and off the field. Pouncey brothers, don't fuck with them. Yeah, Mike Pouncey was definitely a force at center. It's going to hurt them, but I'm not really sure how much. They've signed some veterans, and you can get some effort from veterans, especially on the offensive line.
Speaking of tough veterans who play in the middle, they also lost Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Donkey Kong Suh on his way to Rams and perhaps Super Bowl aspirations. It will be difficult to replace him, but as I said before, with Mike Pouncey in the center position, you can also find productive linemen on the defensive side of the ball if you hire veterans, and that's what they did. So it could work out, maybe not as productive as before, but maybe Robert Quinn can make up some of the disruptive slack.
The other notable player they lost is linebacker Lawrence Timmons, and that's not so much for play, but for name and for experience.
Yes, last year, I don't think he was really all in on Miami. I mean, the guy played like 900 plus snaps for the Steelers for feels like a decade. I mean, you're going to have to fact check me on that, but he did play that many snaps for many years in Pittsburgh, and he was a devout member of that team. He didn't bring that type of dedication, I feel, in Miami. I think he went AWOL a couple times. His heart wasn't in it, and it clearly showed on the field as in production as well as effort level. So, I mean, this might be an addition by subtraction as well. So they got rid of a lot of those guys, so maybe Adam Gase has a bit more control of this team.
Yeah, they lost a lot of dead weight, which is maybe a little bit too much considering Julius
Dead
Thomas.
weight? I'm right fucking here, man.
Let's go top to bottom on this roster and start at quarterback. They got Ryan Tannehill back, who missed last year. Jay Cutler stepped in. It wasn't very successful. What do you think about Tannehill?
I've never really liked him, I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not going to make no qualms about it. Ryan Tannehill isn't my favorite quarterback. On certain websites, he's a star. You know, if you were to grade him like on every snap, yeah. Apparently being a star at quarterback position doesn't lead to very many wins. I'm just learning that now. But Ryan Tannehill isn't necessarily my favorite. Converted wide receiver. I think he was taken 11th overall in a draft not that many years ago. He's had ho-hum success in Miami. I don't think he's that good. I mean, he's still middle of the pack, average, below average. But he's not. I don't think he can take you to that next level. And I don't think Miami even has thoughts of going to the next level. They're thinking playoffs. Good luck to them.
Ryan Tannehill is below average, and both of us will go to the grave saying that. The interesting part is who they've backed him up with in Brock Osweiler, David Fales, and Bryce Petty.
Bryce Petty, yeah, he played on the Jets, I believe. I didn't mind him in college. I think he was a fourth-round pick. Hasn't translated to the pros whatsoever, so it is what it is. I think he's ahead of Brock Osweiler, though, if you were to add those two. David Fales, San Jose State alumni. He played a couple good preseason games here and there. He actually beat Fresno State quarterback, a young Derek Carr, when they were in college. I believe twice head-to-head. David Fales is kind of accurate. Also, not sure if he's really NFL ready. There just isn't much behind Ryan Tannehill here. I don't know who's going to win. I'm gonna gamble on David Fales or bringing in another veteran. Bringing another veteran makes the most sense, but I'm not really sure. Any of the three backups could get cut, could get kept. I'm not sure. But Ryan Tannehill is ho-hum, and so is the rest of this quarterback carousel.
I'm not sure how much gas is left in the tank for Frank Gore, so I'm going to hand this team over to Kenyon Drake as the starter. And then between Frank Gore and Kalen Balayage, it'll be an interesting battle to see who plays behind Kenyon.
Balayage. You always goof up a name. There's only two ways to say this name. Obviously, someone in the comments section will correct us. It's Balage or Balage. It's got to be one of the two, Balayage.
At wide receiver, they have Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, Danny Amendola, Albert Wilson, kick returner Jakeem Grant, as well as Leonte Carew, and a bunch of other notables.
I'm not into geopolitics, but Carew would be a cool name for a country. Now, this group of wide receivers also feels very average. Kenny Stills could always take the top off, but again, that's kind of like one-trick pony style stuff. Danny Amendola has good hands. He can definitely eat up some targets. Now, the guy who should be the star of this wide receiving crew is Devontae Parker. He's a guy who gets his name thrown around a lot in fantasy every year, it seems. I just don't know how tough he is. I don't know if he can really handle this. Seems like a crocodile arm baby when he gets hit. I'm not a big fan of Devontae Parker. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we're on the precipice of the second coming of Jerry Rice, but I really, really doubt it. This is a weak crew for the most part, and I'm not that convinced.
Devontae Parker always looks awesome to start the year, and the second he chips a toenail, the guy goes downhill.
Well, dude, when you get your pedicure blown up, how would you feel?
I'd feel the exact same way. At tight end, they have Mike Gesicki, the second-round pick, as well as a fourth-round pick in Jerram Smith. And then they have other notables such as Marquise Gray, AJ Derby, and Gavin Escobar.
Now Marquise, that's a name that triples as the name of a human, a car, and French royalty. I really like that, the triple threat of the name Marquise. Now, going on to more serious matters, I like AJ Derby almost. AJ Derby had that like catch of the year candidate with Denver not that long ago. There really is not much here. This is an insanely weak group. Maybe the rookies will surprise me. I'm not really sure. But like I gave a little disdain to Mike Gesicki earlier, and I'm not sure about the fourth round rookie they drafted. Can any of these guys block and pass catch? I'm not really sure.
And offensive line from left to right is Laramie Tunsil, Josh Sidden, Daniel Kilgore, Jesse Davis, and then at right tackle, Jawan James.
They almost traded Jawan James for CJ Anderson, and then it got nixed for some reason. I think that was a good play by them nixing that trade. I'd rather Jawan James in any capacity than a running back, even though I quite like CJ Anderson. Now, Laramie Tunsil, I liked him in the draft just 2 years ago, and he kind of fell because of that weird bong video that came out. Oh, yeah, a guy smokes weed in the NFL, big deal. He didn't get suspended. He had an okay year. I think he's a decent player, and it should shape up. At least they filled in the other spots with veterans, with Sitton and Kilgore. This is an okay line. It should stand up to most teams. It's not amazing, but it is okay.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where they're highlighted by Cameron Wake. On the rest of the defensive line, they have Devon Godchow, Jordan Phillips, Robert Quinn, William Hayes, Akeem Spence, Vincent Taylor, Andre Branch, Gabe Wright, last year's first-round pick, and Charles Harris. Not too much else.
William Hayes, a guy that doesn't think dinosaurs are real and that humans just dig holes and then put bones in it. That guy. Real bright defensive line here. Now Cameron Wake, he played for the BC Lions, where we're from, in the Canadian Football League, oddly enough. Just a freak of an athlete, a beast of a human. Nothing but good things to say about Cameron Wake. He's just amazing. Now, Robert Quinn, if you can get him kind of in the same vein as Cameron Wake, they could have a productive year, as I mentioned earlier. Both are long in the tooth. Both can't really play at this high level for much longer. I mean, it's inconceivable for the most part. Father Time never loses. But they seem to have maybe some sort of a rotation in the interior. You know, you had Akeem Smith, Spence, Andre Branch. There's some older guys to play there. This line isn't going to blow you away by any means, but you could get production from the edge from Cameron Wake and from Robert Quinn.
At linebacker, they have a couple retreads in Kiko Alonso as well as Stephon Anthony, two guys that they've traded for, as well as last year's second-round pick in Raekwon McMillan, as well as this year's third-round pick, Jerome Baker. Now
McMillan, what a sweet name, hailing from Shaolin, Raekwon, the incarcerated Scarface. Yeah, Raekwon McMillan is going to play in the middle of this linebacking group. And I also really liked Stephon Anthony in college when he got drafted out of Clemson. 31st overall, I believe, by the New Orleans Saints. He really played well in his first year with the Saints. It just kind of trailed off. Does that remind you of anybody else? How about former Bills second-round pick Kiko Alonso, who's on his third team, I believe. Now, it's really interesting that those guys haven't really turned out as good as their first year. But there is something to be desired there. Now, maybe it's an attitude issue, maybe it's something else, but there is conceivably a lot of talent at this linebacking group. I mean, if you look at the three starters, it's 2 seconds and a first rounder. Retreads in Anthony and Alonso, but there is some talent here. Can they make this talent work? I'm not sure, but this is what separates good teams and bad teams. Good teams make average players great or good, and bad teams make average and good players bad. Now, this probably is a case where it's going to be an average good player bad, but there is that talent capability at the linebacker position.
And at cornerback, they have Cordrea Tankersley, Xavier Howard, this year's first-round pick in Minkah Fitzpatrick, as well as Bobby McCain, Tony Lippett, Walt Aikens, and 6th-round pick Cornell Armstrong.
Man, I just ate. I'm going to puke. This does not look like a very good crew. The one thing I will say, though, is that there was that really memorable game by Xavier Howard against the New England Patriots. I'm going to harp on that game because we're highlighting what good things happened last year. And since it was so few and far between, that game against New England definitely sticks out. And Xavier Howard was the MVP of that game, and he was absolutely fantastic. And that was near the end of the year. So they definitely have something to build on with Xavier Howard. He could be a breakout star, perhaps. Now, I'm not sure where Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to play. Nickel corner does seem like the smoothest transition you could make out of this group. But I'm not blown away by all the rest of the cornerbacks for the Miami Dolphins.
At safety, it's a little bit better with Rashad Jones and TJ McDonald.
Yeah, Rashad Jones, he thinks he's like a big-time safety. He thinks he's the best player in the league. He's made some plays for sure, but I'm not as sold on Rashad Jones. But he definitely sticks out on a defense that generally is played, below average, let's say. So Rashad Jones is probably the star of this secondary, regrettably. Minkah Fitzpatrick could usurp him this year, but it's going to be tough as a rookie. Also, TJ McDonald is the other safety, like you mentioned. Another veteran, lots of snaps played. This is a much better group than the cornerbacks that have just been listed.
So what's the strength of this roster?
With this question, you painted me in the corner for sure, because I don't really like much about this roster. On defense, you could make the case for safety, but you should definitely point out that you have two essentially game wreckers if they can play at that level in Quinn and Wake. Now, I've harped this to death already during this entire video, but I like Wake and I like Quinn, and if you can get them working off in tandem, on third down in particular, third and long, there's going to be some hurt quarterbacks at the end of that rainbow. So I'm going to say the edge rushing of the Miami Dolphins could be the strength. On offense, I actually like the running back crew. Kenyon Drake played really well last year. Frank Gore, he is old, he is long in the tooth, but he is an excellent veteran. And Kalen Ballage is a rookie I like in college, despite a few, let's say, amendable deficiencies. He does have the vision. You can't teach vision. I like Kalen Ballage and his vision. And like I said, the Drake is loose. So I'm going to say, oddly enough, running back, and it seems a little strange considering the names I just mentioned.
And what's the biggest weakness of this roster?
Well, tight end is a complete unknown. They have the two rookies in Gesicki and their 4th-round pick, who's unnamed to me at this moment. They also have Marquise Gray, A.J. Derby, I think Rico Gathers. Just a hodgepodge of underwhelmingness.
Gavin Escobar.
Oh, Gavin Escobar. Rico Gathers is on the Cowboys. Yeah, Gavin Escobar, the cousin of Pumpkin Escobar, a Los Angeles local, number 305. So I'm going to say tight end is the weakness, but most of that's just because I'm not really sure what's going to shake out. Preseason will be interesting, that's for sure.
So going into 2018, we have the Dolphins graded out at a D+. We have them winning 6.42 games, but their over-under is only 5.5. Fat Guy, is this a bet that we might take?
I'm not betting on the Dolphins. I feel like I've shit on this team more than any other team. And sorry, Miami fans, I'm just not a big fan. And I don't even mind their coach, which is the weirdest thing. I think if Miami took Cleveland's coach, we could safely bet the under on any number except 0. However, Adam Gase does kind of offset things. I don't mind them. 16-16 with this group of garbage is pretty good. So I'm going to say no bet, even though the number points to a little bit of an over. And just before you bite my head off, the book thinks that you guys are going to win 5.5 games this year. And we have 6.42, Big Ryan and I. So before you bite our heads off, we're more optimistic than the pros down in Vegas.
So there is slightly an advantage to get them over. It's not a bet that we're going to take, but there is that opportunity there. Hit the like button if you agree with Big Ryan the Fat Guy. Send us a comment below with how many games you think the Dolphins will win next season. And subscribe for more NFL projections just like this.